But in Britain, athletics describes sports whose primary focus is running, jumping, throwing, or walking. So things like marathons, javelin throwing, high jumping, and walking. Hello, you join me in Tokyo, or as it was probably known in ancient Japan, the north side of Chicago. I'm Lawrence Brown, and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond, and one of those memos pertains to terminology, specifically terminology to do with the Olympics. With so much sporting action taking place at the Olympic Games right now, it seems only inevitable that Britain and America would use different words to describe stuff. For example, we Brits refer to what Americans describe as a gold medal as a bronze. But then there's other stuff that I've talked about way too much on this channel, like soccer versus football or cleats versus football boots. But then it occurred to me that the world is full of other inferior sports like swimming and Quidditch. And so today I am going to do a deep dive into some of those Olympic terminological differences between Britain and America. It's become clear to me over the years that hockey is one of the most popular sports in the United States. But that's when we're talking about ice hockey. What about when hockey is played in a field like this, which admittedly has a lot of bumps? Well, Americans and Canadians refer to this sport as field hockey. Not much ice here in Tokyo and or the north side of Chicago until December. And in Britain, ice just doesn't accumulate like it does in North America. And so because of that, we don't know as much about ice hockey, which isn't as popular in Britain as field hockey. In fact, to us, field hockey is hockey. Literally, that's what we call it. So take that, Wayne Zelinsky. Gretzky. Who's Wayne Zelinsky? The dad from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, right? I'm going to cheat a little bit with this next entry because typically speaking, this accessory is not used at the Olympic Games. But the animal that wears them is, so that's good enough for me. Both Britain and America are of course familiar with horses. And in the sport of horse racing, a device will often be used to restrict a horse's peripheral vision. This is mostly to keep the horse's eye on the prize of winning a nice shiny trophy for their human. But it turns out there's a very slight difference in how both countries name this thing. In the United States, these are known as blinders, presumably because they blind the horse. In Britain, they're known as blinkers, presumably because they make the horse blink. And I did find one internet forum that said some British riders might refer to these as winkers, but that sounds suspiciously like another British word, and at this point that's just rubbing salt in the wound for the poor horse. Throughout the years, the United States has boasted a wealth of table tennis players, from Forrest Gump to all of the other ones, and so they know a thing or two about how this game works. But the same is true for us British, and I know that because I played it as a kid. And as a kid, I referred to the little handheld instrument that you use to knock the ball back and all of that stuff as a bat. But in the United States, that's just not enough syllables because they refer to it as a paddle, which I suppose is quite useful if America's Olympic Committee ever comes under budget constraints, because they can use the same equipment for table tennis and kayaking, probably. You didn't think I'd get through this entire video without talking about football/soccer again, did you? Well, it turns out there are other soccer versus football word differences that get overlooked. For instance, you'll often hear American commentators refer to a football match as a soccer game. And it's not played on a pitch, it's played on a field. If a striker smashes the ball against the top corner of a goal frame, American commentators will say that he or she hit the upper 90. And the offside rule, the definition of which I'm not going to get into right now, is often referred to by American commentators in a plural sense, as in that player was offsides as opposed to offside. And in that spirit, that brings us on to this next entries. This isn't shown on television, thankfully, but athletes need a place to go and get changed. And as somebody who's been to a gymnasium in both countries once, I've had the experience of seeing how both Britain and America treat these rooms. And the truth is, they're mostly the same. You know, broken lockers abound, naked people everywhere, and floors that are suspiciously wet. But while these similarities may exist, there's one thing that differs. The name. Growing up in Britain, I always refer to these as changing rooms, but here in America, they're locker rooms. In other words, each accurately describes what it does, unlike this. somewhere during the course of time, a memo got lost as to how the English language is supposed to use the words athletics and track and field. In America, the word athletics is often used as a catch-all term for sports in general. But in Britain, athletics describes sports whose primary focus is running, jumping, throwing, or walking. So things like marathons, javelin throwing, high jumping, and walking. In the US and Canada, such a group of sporting events might be referred to as track and field, and this is where things get confusing. In Britain, we use track and field to describe those sporting events that specifically take place on the track and field of stadiums like those used at the Olympics. And while this definitely includes things like the javelin, the high jump, and the 100 meters, it does not include things like marathons and cross-country running like it does in the United States definition. Is that clear? Good. And finally, I wanted to conclude today's Olympic fanfare by pointing the spotlight to one word in particular used by American commentators. When referring to a successful athlete or team, both British and American commentators might use a term like the most successful in history. But every so often on American television, you will hear the word winningest, as in someone or a team that won more than everyone else. Winningest. Winningest. As in, Michael Phelps was the winningest swimmer in the history of everything before his career was tarnished following accusations that the athlete used performance-enhancing arms. That's it for this episode. Let me know in the comments below some of your favourite sports terms differences. I'm Lawrence Brown. You can follow me on Twitter at LostInThePondUS, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that my videos don't get lost in the pond. An Olympic-sized shout out to my patrons who make these videos possible. If you would like to become a patron of Lost in the Pond, you can do so at patreon.com/lostinthepond. Until the next video, goodbye. But while these similarities, shut up. The bloody geese flying over. You are not Olympians. Don't shit on me.